You're listening to The Performance-Driven Warehouse, turning complex operational data into measurable performance. The modern warehouse looks nothing like what it did 20, 10, or even 5 years ago. Thanks to the speed of the markets, tech advances, and changing business processes, the warehouse itself has evolved into a complex network of people, systems, and automation. Balancing all of this to keep on top of volatility, disruptions, and even new opportunities is kind of an art form. Successful warehouse management depends on how well you can see everything that's happening across your network. And that network is powered by data. But what good is all the data in the world if it's not under the right lens and connected in a strategic way so you can understand and act on it? In order to gain the visibility to manage cost, performance, and capacity in real time, you need to unify your data. That's what today's warehouse performance management is all about. Hello, I'm Dan Keto. Welcome to the Performance-Driven Warehouse, where industry experts and operators share how they've transformed data complexity into operational clarity. Good morning. On today's episode of the Easy Metrics podcast, we're joined by Vanya Jansen, a human capital and certified public supply chain professional with more than 20 years of experience across financial services, manufacturing, logistics, and retail. Vanya spent a decade at Pepcor Retail, progressing from national HR manager to national head of distribution centers, where she led operations supporting over 2,600 stores with an annual throughput exceeding 1.2 billion units. Today, as managing director of OptiGrow and a lecturer at Stellenbosch University, she helps organizations solve complex cross-functional challenges through data analysis, workforce optimization, and supply chain resilience. In this episode, we'll explore why stakeholder alignment is critical to warehouse performance management, how unified data models break down silos, and what happens when key voices are brought into the decision-making process too late. Vanya, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. I'm excited for our discussion today.
Yes, it's wonderful to see you again. I remember meeting you at the work conference, and it was a fantastic conversation we had. So, Vanya, tell us a little about your background. You mentioned you're an industrial psychologist, and you did this incredible project with Pepcor. Responding to my presentation at the work conference, you really called out some of the challenges presented in going through this digital transformation process, and especially the lessons learned. You really hit the point on the head with the challenges you had bringing the stakeholders together. So if you could give us an overview of what you did there and some of the obstacles you ran into and how you overcame those.
Yeah, Dan, so a lot of people look at my background and they're quite surprised that one can move between various careers that are so opposite or opposing, So my background has always been in human resource management and industrial psychology. So I hold the honors in HR and a master's in psychology. However, I've always found myself intrigued by the systems that people need to operate. So while I was always dealing with people and people as the problem, the more time I spent with the people, I realized that the people aren't the problem. I need to understand the system and the process. So how my career unfolded is that I've typically started within an HR space, be it in the manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, and eventually migrated over into the operational space. Similarly, that happened in my last career. And so I moved over from managing the HR, managing the people, into actually managing the movement of the boxes. So one comes with quite a different view of the world compared to someone who would typically be appointed into that role with an industrial engineering background. They are trained in a specific way to see certain things. Similarly in HR, similarly in industrial psychology, we are trained to see certain things. And I think having that exposure of different views of the world has helped me to navigate huge complexity. Now, when I say huge complexity coming in, I remember, and that was probably about 15 years ago, running 4 different facilities. And I just wanted to know, are we good or are we not good? Well, who am I comparing myself against? Is it against the budget? Is it against the customer? Is it against the sales team, marketing team, planning team, buying team? Who is my customer? And And I think part of the evolution was to try and understand if we are constantly facing these economic challenges, right? Growth, we're constantly growing. In South Africa, our labor, similarly to like in US, is the increase is always higher than CPI. Typically, your customer is not going to pay more than what they can afford, which means that the money is reducing. Therefore, the cost of doing business has to reduce. Now, in my early days, I always focused on what was inside of my control within the 4 walls. And by doing that, I needed to understand the very basics. How long are my machines running? Do I have batteries that is 24/7 operational? When do I need to have my CapEx expenditure? Am I getting 100% productivity of my existing machines? Are my people 100% productive or not? Do I have the right people in the right places? There was zero visibility. I had no idea. All I knew was I'm paying X amount for machines. I'm paying my machine maintenance costs for every 120 hours, whether that machine was operating or not, lifting or not. The fact that the ignition was on, I was paying for it. And as we evolved, I needed to understand more, and I couldn't understand more without having data. Eventually, obviously, coming with the HR background and a little bit of finance and business management, I could comfortably go to the executive team and say, this is my budget, which is X. I'm comfortable to take a 5% saving and give it to you on day one. Now, I'm prepared to bank it as part of my metric on the proviso that you give me 1, 2, and 3, either in terms of people and structure or in terms of CapEx expenditure. And that was how I started negotiating and understanding how do you move from a base that is already stretched. Because at the end of the day, in the operational space, it's about flow through of your product, and it's about reducing cost. And it's about getting customer satisfaction on time in full. That's the reality, right? And so now we got to ask ourselves, how do we chip at this thing bit by bit? Because it's not like you can change the entire system, because it doesn't work that way. I tried it in my first 3 years. So what I then embarked in, coming again with an industrial and psychology background, I said, okay, how do we create this energy for change that is required? I need everyone else to get the buy-in. Now, in reality, if you don't tell the next person what is in it for them, they are not interested. That's the reality. It was a painful lesson to learn, and I learned it very quickly, because as much as what running DCs was my priority, the reality is I couldn't do my job if the planning team and the way the distributions came was not in a convenient or a conducive way that I could optimize my design. Ultimately, what happens? I just take whatever I'm processing and I give it to the transport team and I say, good luck, best of wishes, deliver on time, you the last mile, you make sure that whatever needs to be done is done. But in reality, what ends up happening, we are so fixated in terms of driving silo optimization, because once you start looking at the business or the supply chain as a complex adaptive system, I think people struggle with that. Firstly, because we all have different lenses. I wear a lens when I have to wear a lens of people, when I have to wear a lens of operations, when I'm going to go and debate my budget and get approval, I have to wear the lens of the finance person to anticipate what is it likely that they're going to give me challenges about, and have I come up with a solution. So again, that hard lesson to learn wasn't about me trying to sell what I know. It was actually about how do I know what is driving everyone else who has an input into me. And that is when we started unpacking. So why does the planner release most of their distributions on a Thursday and a Friday? It makes no sense to me. Yet I'm running my operation for 7 days a week. I mean, why would they do that, Back at the ranch, guess why? Because their KPIs have been linked to service levels based on stock that is in the DC. So guess what? Guess when the stock comes in? Between Wednesday and Friday. So guess what? That is why you have your distributions Thursdays and Fridays. But again, how would I have known? Yes.
I was going to say, you just gave me an aha moment. What's in it for me? I was told that about 10 years ago when I was calling into a client, and the executive was like, well, what's in it for me? And I was offended by that statement because I thought, how selfish, because I'm like, this is going to save your company lots of money, but he wanted to know what's in it for me. What's in it for me? Now I realize is he's speaking the way you're speaking, which is each role has they're focused on their role. And when you are articulating this change, because what you were doing is saying, we're going to push this change through the organization. Each individual is going to pursue the KPIs, the things that they are told to do. And so you have to articulate what's in it for them if you're going to want to bring this through the organization. And that's a very simple statement. And I finally see it. It's very powerful. So sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just like, wow, I so looked at that the wrong way when that was told to me. And now I get it. So please continue.
And Dan, again, from a psychological point of view, I've always said, people are driven by three things, in my view. One, they want to know that they can make a difference. Number two, they want to be recognized. And number three, they want a sense of belonging as part of the team. If you hit those three things, people will do magic. But often we don't focus on that. So we get them bogged down in all these process steps and all of these things that they have to tick off. And we don't allow them enough time to be empowered so that they can tell me what is actually going on in the business. And so again, it's all about coming back to this theme of what's in it for me. I had to go and understand what makes that planet tick, because I couldn't go and ask them to change the distribution cycle. They were like, Vanya, are you smoking something? Because I'm not going to do that. And so one now needs to say, so I'm saying, okay, now imagine if you changed your inflow plan and I could reduce my lead time. If you were able to give me a drumbeat, so instead of sending you stock only after 8 days, I can send you stock after 4 days if you give me 200 every few days. Yes, your service level may drop, but guess what happens to your sales? Your sales are going to increase because you can close the gap. Now we start having a mature discussion, because now we understand how are both of us going to be potentially penalized, but also as a broader system, how does the total value start being derived? It's a similar thing that I was trying to drive in the warehouse, because I came from the transport division over into the warehousing division. And they said, Vanya, the first thing you do, give us a forecast. Just tell me how many boxes I'm going to receive. Wow, what a mission, Dan. I can understand why we never ever received it. I mean, if we didn't know what the capacity is, how much units per carton you're going to do, what is your pick rate, how quick are your conveyors running, are you going to have any stoppages? Being in a DC is so complex because you have multiple systems operating at the same time. And you have to look at it in a system view. You have to, because depending on what is coming through the pipe from the front and depending on how you optimize the middle, you can have a profound effect on what you deliver into transport. And transport's always going to be 2/3 compared to 1/3 of your warehousing cost. That's the reality we deal with. A simple thing like, how do we increase the size of the box? That was a question. Do you know how difficult it was to get to an answer? Why? Because it depends on who is starting the process. How does the distribution look that is coming to the warehouse? What is it that the planner has forecasted and decided to send to which store on which day of the week? Because depending on how they choose to pull and to bring that together, if it's purely to hit a service level, then is there any thought of what the impacts would be on the DC? No, there would be zero. So guess what happens on the DC side? Your cost increases continuously because you have no idea what you're getting. Now imagine you could somehow create inflows that doesn't impact service level, but also creates, instead of having this very broad variation, to a variation that's flatter. Simple example, what did we do? We changed our replenishment cycles. I said, but why is all your products on the replenishment cycle 2? That's no problem. But does it come in week 1 or week 2? What if we change some of them to come in on week 1 and some of them to come in on week 2? You still have your 2-week drumbeat. But guess what? Based on the product profile, once it comes through my facility, we can actually start working with this. And guess what? I can then start filling boxes. I can then start using bigger boxes. And so if I'm now using 16 boxes per cube instead of 36 boxes per cube, think of the financial implications of that all the way through the chain. So as these things started materializing and we started seeing it, because we needed to find ways, every year my challenge to my team was, how do you do better than last year? The challenge is, how do you absorb volume growth and how do you absorb CPI without increasing your cost? That's the challenge.
So how do you improve cross-silo communication? Because when I look at the warehouse, as you said, incredibly complicated. Managers tend to optimize within their own little world. And it's, you go back to the book, The Goal by Elijah Goldratt, who talks about flow dynamics in facilities. And if you optimize one area, it often creates inefficiencies in these other areas. So when you approach this, how did you break down those walls? Because each person cares about their thing and you have this holistic system and you're talking beyond the warehouse. So going back to your question, your thing about changing the size of the box, it touches 100 different people through the entire supply chain or more, and managers and so forth, to get that decision through, to do the analysis, say, okay, if we change it here, what's the downstream effect all the way to the retail store or the customer? So how did you tackle that? Because you're literally talking tons of different lenses coming at you, fighting over what they believe is the truth. And it could be the truth for them, but it's not the truth for the holistic flow of the entire operation. How did you do that?
So I think the first level, and that's why I talk about maturity, especially when we're talking about systems. For me, I don't want to see a system unless I've seen it in Excel. That was my simple version. Tell me and show me what it is I need to see before we get sophisticated. Because in reality, we are so fixated on solving problems. I'm actually planning on doing another talk that I solve myself so into I solve the simple problem so efficiently that I break the whole business. Because each silo is working fantastic at the expense of the entire system. So step 1 was visibility and transparency. Even before visibility, it was transparency. It was, guys, I will forgive you. If we are doing something wrong, it's okay. It's okay. This is your period to come and put all of your challenges on the table and let's start taking it out. Because at the end of the day, what's the role of a manager and a leader? The role of a manager and a leader is to take all obstacles out of the employee's way in order for them to perform at their best. But what do we end up doing? The minute the box stops, you've got the employee, the team leader, the supervisor, and the manager, everyone standing around the box. And that's the nature of operations. So I had to unlearn those things. It was very difficult. And the reason I had to unlearn it is because there's an expectation when you're in operations. If the popo really hits the fan, you get calls from executives directly, and they expect answers from you. And so you now need to build trust in your team. And the only way to build that trust in your team is to have visibility and transparency. Because if you are not able to interpret the data, it can be hidden and they can pull wool over your eyes. And believe you me, in my beginning days, Dan, did my team do that? Of course they did. Of course they did it, because they never expected me to ask the level of questions that I did afterwards. Because the minute you start seeing one layer of truth, you have the ability to start asking the next layer, which allows you to ask the next layer. And when people trust that your intent is not to harm them, but to build them, that is the difference. It was a simple thing of, there's so many parts at play. It's so difficult to break them all. But because I was also leading the HR space and the operations space with two different team members driving it, I needed to ensure that alignment constantly. Because then my team members came to me and said, why are you still rating me on a 1 to 5? Because everyone wants to be a 5. Don't we all want to be 5s? Yay, we all want to be 5s. But in reality, are we? And I really had to, I asked my team, I was always very open, straight talk, no insult. It was very intimidating at first as a leader to stand in front of your team and let them put on a board 3 things you should stop doing, start doing, and continue doing. It was a painful exercise. But once you learn that that is how you build trust in your team and you hold to account as a leader, lead from the front, your team will follow. And then people started coming up,
On the data side, I see this problem all the time. So you have someone who knows their data. They'll present the data in such a way that makes them look as good as possible. The data is truthful, but the data lacks the context and nuance behind it. There could be qualitative factors that are not showing up in the data. They may show up in other parts downstream, but in the data that they're optimized to and showing you, it says, oh, everything's perfect. But the reality is if you go outside of that, there's a downstream effect and it causes issues. How did you penetrate into that context so you could see the real story? Because they're showing you something that's true, but yet it's not true. And it's not maybe their intention because they're optimized to their KPIs, but there's depth to it that shows that there's a challenge holistically through the whole system. How did you penetrate that?
So, Dad, I find a lot of the time that people don't actually know their businesses, unfortunately. Your first point of departure is that you need to know your business. I asked my managers, tell me, what is your profile of product in your warehouse? And they all looked at me with very big eyes. And then I asked them, what is your seasonal impact of your flow, your density, and your velocity? And then they looked at me with even bigger eyes. And they're like, I'm supposed to know this. And then they told me how great their picking was. And the minute I started challenging them on those numbers, Stan, we could then start unpacking and saying, is it true or is it not true? Because when we look at numbers one-dimensionally, it looks fantastic. But when you look at it in relation to many other things, you start identifying what's actually going on. But you cannot get to that stage because of the maturity. Step 1 is just create visibility. I employed super users in every single site that I had. Their full day job, full day, was downloading and building pivot tables, building graphs. And as we knew something better, we advanced it. And then we knew, you can pull 2 graphs together. So now we can compare these 2 departments. Fantastic. Then we brought in the 3rd department. Then we said, why are we now only, as an example, why am I only looking at productivity based on pick rate in my whole warehouse? I said, that's BS. I want to know what is the productivity rate of my drivers. A long fork driver, a reach truck driver, my man-up starter truck drivers. I want to see that. I want to know what distance they're riding. Are they choosing to ride the short distance so their productivity looks great? Or is it because of the weight that they have to do? What is causing these changes in the numbers? And so how our maturity grew was I had meetings every morning with my team. I managed my business on this cell phone with multiple WhatsApps that my team started to develop. In the beginning, it was only one block because we only focused on inbound. And then when we were comfortable with inbound, we moved to the next level, stock. And then we were comfortable with stock, we moved to picking. And then we were comfortable with picking, we moved to dispatch. And guess what? The minute that we moved to stock from inbound, they forgot that inbound is still important. So guess what? Everyone stopped recording inbound, right? So those are the realities that we go through all the time. You're laughing because I'm sure that's exactly how you experienced it, right?
I always say it's where where the attention goes, the energy flows. So as soon as you move your attention somewhere else, everyone else just scatters back to what they're doing. That's where you almost have to like digitally institutionalize the change you put into the culture with a feedback loop. So then it continues, because if you don't, it just vaporizes very quickly.
Exactly. And it was painful change because I sat in operations meetings. I traveled often. Everyone hated the fact that I asked them. I mean, we would have an operations meeting for an hour and I'd be asking them the same issue in 10 different questions. Why have we not been able to move the 70 containers we needed to move? I mean, it's not a complex question. And so they will come and they will give you 100 different stories. And eventually they realize, let me just be truthful and honest and say I never resourced enough. Then we can get done with the pain quickly and we can move on. So it's this toing and froing with people, understanding where their strengths are and having those one-on-ones, coming back to the performance reviews. I took the numbers away. I said, why must I talk about the number with you? You will know if you're a top performer or if you're not a top performer. If my intent as a leader is truly to empower you to manage your business the best way you can, then I'm going to tell you where you are exceptionally good at and where you need help. And I'm going to give you the support that you need to make you shine.
What I'm hearing, and I think is amazing, it's really about leadership. I can imagine how uncomfortable that operations room was with you asking these questions, because immediately they're going to be defensive about it, think that you're questioning them. And so it takes a level of effort to make them understand that you're not questioning them. You're questioning the truth. All you want is the truth so you can help solve the problem. Why did they have wrong staffing levels? Probably because they didn't know what their staffing levels should be, because they didn't have the information to do this. So they are playing the CYA game, cover your rear end, and giving you defensive mechanisms. You're like, look, I just want the truth. I'm not trying to attack you. I just want to know what the truth is so we can work together and solve this problem. And there's a big effort in that. But that's what change management is about, is saying, look, we all are on the same side of the table here. I'm not on the opposite side of the table. Let's try to solve this problem. We need to do it together. They have the context. They have the experience. You're just asking the questions to get to what the truth is, that they may not know what the truth is. And you did that very ably. I want to ask one last question, because we're coming up to the top of our time period here. So you went through this incredible transformation of Pepcore, both operationally, but it also was a data-driven endeavor. And it was a multi-year endeavor. When we met at the work conference, you mentioned you had to do a bunch of restarts because you didn't have the stakeholders in the room that all of them that you needed initially. And so as soon as you bring a new lens in, it changes everything again. So if you were to start today under that same project, what would you have done differently and how would you have started it? Because this is where I'd say 90% of the big companies are right now, especially in the United States, is they are facing this wall of demand. We need AI. We need to do all this stuff. They don't have the data set. I mean, they got the raw data, but they haven't gone through this process to bring it all together, to marry to the stakeholders, the lenses, and do all the stuff that you did for Pepcore. So if you could give some words of advice and kind of the steps to how you would approach it, I think the audience would really appreciate that.
Sure, Dan. And that's why I loved your presentation. It's like all the electrodes went off in my brain. It's like, yay, this thing actually exists outside of my head. I was so excited because the reality is that And I mean, I'm lecturing at master's level now, and I have all these data IT guys coming in, and the theme is consistent. If your data structures from the beginning is not accurate, there is no AI that can be built on it. And so when we met, my first point of departure is always, what does a word mean? When I talk data and comms, I wear 3 hats. Hat number 1, reporting. I look at what has happened. Hat number 2, transactional, live data. I can make decisions with it. Hat number 3, forecast, prediction. So one of our biggest challenges were in the beginning is that we were talking about data, but we'd never clearly defined what is the structure of that data, who needs to use it and why. So now we've got some planners in, but we don't have other planners in. So now we get their view of the world on reporting, only to realize that they are CFH, they're not FMCG, so they don't need to worry about expiry dates, do they? It's close. The minute that you start bringing confectionery in, guess what? Expiry dates, shelf lives, all these. And this is now new news, So now we're asking, did we go and did we get the right people around the table? And I think one of the challenges we ran too fast. We did bring many people in the room, and then we got too many voices, and that confused us. And then we had to step back again and say, okay, are we comfortable that in every silo, the data that we require to optimize within that silo, is it accurate or not? Because even within that silo, we didn't even have unique identifiers so that we could calibrate data across different systems. If we're just talking about the warehouse space, Dan, my employee clock-in system, that information and how it looked, even the name of the individual was typed different to my performance data, was typed different to my machine access. And I'm like, guys, this is basics. How do I see that different people between HR, between the labor clock-in schedule, between the production, and between my WMS, it's the same name. Can we just get that first as a point of departure? Let's get terminology. If we're talking in planning, what does a replenishment cycle mean? Whether you're in shoes or whether you're in chocolates or whether you're in alcohol. What does it mean? Does it mean different things for different people? Because we assume in our business, we have all these acronyms, a myriad. So now you get so scared and intimidated to say, oh, I don't know what that acronym means. But I'm assuming with my lens, when I talk service level, it must mean this. But the more that you unpack processes, the more you realize, I made a mistake. So then you need to open it up and say, guys, are we comfortable that this is a true reflection of where we need to be? Because a lot of the time, the other challenge was, as a leader, my KPIs, my bonuses were negatively impacted in order for me to make the right decision for the business. And that's a difficult thing, because how do you take away potential earnings of people to do the right thing for the business? You need to build that in, and you need to understand, and a lot of the time we have a myriad of KPIs. And it's all putting us into a corner. What is the 3 numbers that you need to drive your business? What is it? And how do you then align everything to it? And those were the discussions we started having. And so as we started visibly seeing what is it that is making the warehouse tick, what are what we call in Afrikaans uitskitters, what are the outliers, and why does it exist? We got a company in, I'm going to tell you this, to come and do a nice 5-year projection plan. Guess what, Dan? They looked at all the data. They came with this fantastic solution. And then I told them, guys, can I tell you something? Guess what? When you see in the data that I processed all the stock through this conveyor belt, it's not true. I made as if I was processing it through that conveyor belt, but physically I was constrained because it was peak. So I made a different plan to process it. According to the data, it looks as if my capacity, I'm capable of doing it. But in reality, if I had to put so many boxes on that conveyor, my entire business would have come to a standstill. And so again, it's constantly, do people know their business? Have we clearly defined what our triggers are? What are the things that has the most significant impact on cost, productivity, flow through? That for me is what are those triggers? Tell me what they are. And a lot of the time we think we know what it is, but we actually don't. We maybe know what 55% of it is. But do we know the other 45%? Usually when I ask that question, then I get that big eyes again. And then once you're comfortable and you have someone who, and then we need to train people, Dan. We need to train them to wear lenses of the next person. And that's what we've done. We started having talks with the planning team to say, when you choose to bring in 8 colors, even if it's the same 2,000 units you're sending, but instead of sending 2 colors of 8,000, you're now sending 8 colors of 2,000. Guess what? That means I need to build 8 picking bays. That means that your demand at the store level is going to reduce. It means that the units in the carton that I send to the store is going to reduce. Now, if you are not able to convert a decision that someone else has made, see that decision in your lens and then convert it back into their lens, then we're going nowhere slowly. And it's always about sweep in front of your own door first. And then once you're ready and you're happy that it's clean in front of your doorstep, then we can go and challenge the other teams. And that's all I can say. It's the data, unified data across multiple systems within the silo. Once we're comfortable and we can trust the data, because it's about trust. Transparency brings visibility. Leadership empowers transparency. It's a flow. And then, and as we're going now, we took all of that. It's in a data lake, and we can now start extracting that data. And I mean, the rewards, Dan, I'm telling you, if we went through 2 massive challenges. The first one, post-COVID, we used all our safety stock in the warehouse. Guess what happened the next year? I had to bring in additional stock. I couldn't increase cost. We had to absorb that. How do you absorb it? Through visibility. So, but yeah, I hope that I'm answering you enough. I mean, there's so many things, that's going through my mind and bringing back so much memories.
Yeah, what I love is you think differently because of your background. You're really looking at that human element, the change management element. This is something I notice a lot of groups, they tend to look at it from such an engineering perspective or costing perspective. And there's really a much broader view to bring this all together. So Vanya, we're at the top of the hour here. If people wanted to get a hold of you and tap into your expertise, is there a website they can go to? Or we'll put this in the show notes, but is there somewhere they can go if they wanted to reach out to you and just say, hey, we would love to talk to you, or even, bring you in as a consultant to help with this? Because you've done it and you have a unique approach that I think is very effective.
Thanks for that, Dan. I'm also busy doing my PhD in engineering management now, believe it or not. Talk about another angle, specifically tapping into transitioning specialist engineers from driving efficiency to creating value across the entire chain. We need to change the system. So I'm available on LinkedIn, Vanya, Vanya.Jansen. Alternatively on www.optigrowconsult.co.za. And I look forward to being at the work conference in May. Yeah, and I'll be at the work conference in May sharing some more of this insights.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Vanya, thank you for your time today. Subscribe to the Performance Driven Warehouse wherever you get your podcasts. For proven data strategies and guidance on warehouse performance management, visit easymetrics.com. Until next time, let data lead your performance and never stop improving. Keep turning complexity into performance.